One of the first comic books I ever owned was the Masters of the Universe series from Marvel Star Line imprint. I think that probably my interest in comic books spawned from my interest in Masters of the Universe, because that actually opened the door to me and saying, hey, there's these epic stories as well that live on in a printed format that I can enjoy every month.
Youngsters who bought the He-Man figures in 1982 got an extra treat, packed in alongside the toy. Sensational mini He-Man comic books were included with each figure, telling early stories of Eternia's heroes. DC Comics produced a comic book miniseries that same year, even before Filmation debuted their popular television series. Masters of the Universe moved over to Marvel's Star comic lines in 1986 and was revived in 2002 by MV Creations, a company built by He-Man fans. Comic books were a natural fit for He-Man and his friends and foes. So join us now for a 4-color adventure exploring the comic book adventures of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
I first got involved in Masters of the Universe when Mark Evanier, a cartoonist, comic book writer, whom I knew through an organization, Southern California-based organization called CAPS, the Comic Art Professional Society. And he, for some reason, seemed to think that when somebody gave him a call and said, hey, do you know somebody who can put together these comics that'll pack out with the Masters of the Universe toys, he thought for some reason I'd be good at this. I had never edited a comic book in my life. My background was primarily comic strips. I was working as an art director and as a designer and a writer and copywriter and whatnot. Prior to my involvement with the comics, they had been packing out comics with the early toys. And I don't know who produced those. They had a look of something that was very similar to DC Comics. I don't think DC Comics actually packaged them, but they had that particular kind of look. They were bringing this in-house, and Ron was looking for some local Southern California-based people. He brought me in, we sat down, we talked. Tina Harris had written the scripts. I don't believe they were based on any shows. They might have been, but I don't believe so. In the first year, they were written by Tina Harris, who was on staff at Mattel. I was a freelance art director, and so the scripts were supplied to me. After that, in the second year, a gentleman named Tim McKilpin was with the company. He also worked on the Hot Wheels account, and Tim hired the writers to produce the books, including Stephen Grant. Nobody in marketing was involved in these particular things. These were just little adventures with the characters. We get scripts that weren't broken down by page or panel per se. They were a little bit more like animation scripts than comic book scripts, which usually break down a page in a very specific way. They're a little more directed on paper than something you might see in a traditional film script.
I was influenced more by the cartoon show than the toys, partially because all of my friends were working at Filmation at the time, and I got to see a lot of their storyboards and what they were doing and all the fun they were having. I never got a chance to work on a TV show directly. I was working at Filmation for my first 2 years of my career, but I had moved on to working at another studio, but all of my friends were still working at Filmation. And my shot at working on the He-Man show was when Lee Nordling got the contract to do the little comic books behind the toys. And so that's when I brought all of my Jack Kirby and John Buscema influence, my style, into this little comic book to try and make it as dynamic and as exciting as I could. The format, since it's like way smaller than even a regular comic book, I knew that I had to simplify the graphics so that it shrank and was readable at that size. And so it helped me to, lock in the storytelling, make it exciting. And I was just trying to, give the kids the best entertainment that I could. And I was also trying to satisfy the little boy in me who always wanted to do comic books and never got a shot to do that. And that was like the greatest experience of that time when I was doing that.
Larry was very much influenced by the Jack Kirby style, and there was another gentleman in the organization named Michael Lee. Michael Lee was an inker. I knew Stan Sakai. Stan Sakai is a letterer and a cartoonist. He's done a book, Yosagi Yojimbo, but at the time he was primarily lettering for Sergio Aragonis's Gru. And I utilized the local talent that was Southern California based to be involved in this comic book venture. The rates were reasonable. There were a lot of people who wanted to stretch their muscles, and the books were fun. I had numerous industry veterans work on some of our books, including Mike Vosberg and Mike Sikowski, who did wonderful work on Justice League back in the 1960s. I'm not sure if his work for me was his last comics efforts, but it was wonderful to see Mike's style imposed on the Masters of the Universe books.
I believe I did 4 or 5 of them, and they were a lot of fun. I got a chance. Some of my books were inked by some of my friends of mine. One of them was Jim Mitchell. One was Bruce Timm. It's kind of nice seeing my work inked by these other artists. It was like, it's a lot of fun seeing how other people interpret your pencil work and such.
First year I did 5 books. The second year I believe I did anywhere from 8 to 10. The next year another 8 to 10. I had a pretty good crew. In Southern California, we became the place where somebody could try out as a comic book penciler or an inker. There were a lot of people who were looking to get involved in the comic book industry, and at the time, if you didn't live on the East Coast, specifically in the New York area, it was very, very tough to get work and be noticed for the very first time.
He-Man, the way the writers wrote it, He-Man was visiting all these new different lands and stuff around the world of Eternia, and so I got a chance to create all these different minority villages and towns around the world, basically integrating the world besides just being He-Man. You had you had an Asian race, you had a black race, you had an American Indian type race, all scattered around the same planet. And I got a chance to invent some new characters for them.
These books only involve the core He-Man Masters of the Universe characters. He-Man, Skeletor, but none of the others. There wasn't a huge line. There were brand new characters who were never toys. So in the very first script, we turned it in, and Larry had a lot of room to play, and he did. On the second script, we had no character designs, and for any of the supplemental characters. And he said, "What do these characters look like?" And I said, "I don't know. I didn't get character designs." Larry said, "Can I make them African American?" And I said, "I don't see why not. I'll check with Ron." Ron said, "I don't see why not." And so we integrated the Masters of the universe with that. Michael Lee chipped in on the second one and said, "Can we make these next characters Asian?" I said, "Okay." And then on the very next one, we said, well, we haven't represented the Native Americans, and these were the first non-Caucasians ever introduced to the Masters of the Universe world. This was a lot of fun. We had a lot of freewheeling action sequences that we could extend. Very little was constrained, as long as everything was child appropriate. After the first set of comics came out, marketing discovered that these were hugely popular with the kids. The kids had the comic, they had the toys, and they enacted the play, helped the children enact play patterns with what the characters were going to do. After I produced the first of the comic books for Masters of the Universe, I became the comic book guy. So if anyone wanted a form of sequential art, they came to us for other product lines like She-Ra, Princess of Power. I had a wide range of involvement in various developments. For example, I was hired to put together a comic strip based on Masters of the Universe. And in putting this together, we brought in Christy Marks, who is a well-known comic book writer and animation writer. And we put together wrote a one-week sample. Larry Houston, who penciled the first 5 books that we did with Masters of the Universe. Also, he penciled the strip. I had a friend named Jim Mitchell who had a tenure at Disney, quite a long tenure. He inked it. He also penciled a lot of the books, the other books that I did in subsequent years for Masters of the Universe, but Jim Mitchell inked the strip sample that we did. And Stan Sakai, who has gone on to a fabulous career with Usagi Yojimbo, was the letterer. We did produce the sample that they actually used to go out and begin to sell, actually produce the feature with. I wasn't involved in the continuing strip that was actually syndicated. The same way that there's a group of kids out there that grew up with Star Wars, and that it's informed them in different ways. There's another group of kids, Val Staples among them, who just were completely informed by He-Man and Masters of the Universe. I remember being surprised to see the site that Val Staples put together along with some other fans for this, and that he was able to go on and produce his own interpretation of a He-Man for the comics market is pretty amazing.
When I first began my path to have a career in the comic book industry, I was primarily interested in actually doing a Masters of the Universe comic book. One of the first things we did, one of the first people that we worked with was David Campiti from Glass House Graphics. And when we worked with David, we actually inquired with David, is there a way that we can get the license to do a Masters of the Universe comic book? Of course, David said, from his years of experience working with licensed properties, that would probably be an impractical idea, and probably best not to pursue it. And we tried on our own and learned, as David was correct, that was not a possible a venue to pursue. But the idea of working at comics still stuck with me, and it was something I wanted to do. The formation of MV Creations, my comic book studio, spawned from Matt Tyrion and I wanting to create our own original comics. From there, we realized that we had the potential, from the connections we had made through other artists, to actually go out and pursue licensed properties, or to do comic books that we want to do other than our own creations, or to work for other clients. From there, we were able to use our experience and our knowledge and our connections to spearhead a campaign to eventually work on a Masters of the Universe comic book. The passion to do the Masters of the Universe comic was what fueled what we wanted to do. We were relatively still unknowns in the industry. We had no large credits to our name. Mattel had no idea who we are. And we worked diligently for over a year pitching ideas to Mattel so we could get noticed, from sending constant proposals to sending large-scale maxi comic books that we could not avoid so they could see what we were capable of. And eventually, because of also our connections to our website, He-Man.org, the largest Masters of the Universe fan community online, we were able to use that from a PR standpoint to say, hey, we know the brand, we know what fans want, we have the comic book experience in the industry as well, and we should be the people that produce this Masters of the Universe comic book, because it's going to be what you want to see.
I first got involved with He-Man when I first saw the very first advertisement in a magazine. I didn't know anything about Masters of the Universe. It was the really first advertisement that came out in Italy. So after a couple of months, I guess, I went to a shop and bought my first figure. The first figures I bought were He-Man, Skeletor, and Teela all together. And from then I started collecting the entire line. I pretty much completed the entire series within the year it was out, and then I kept buying the characters that came after that. The cartoon series first started in Italy in 1993, I guess, as the same in US, just a few months later. And it was pretty much the same. It was dubbed, of course, as any cartoon in Italy, but the voices were very, very good.
You were wonderful. Thank you and your...
This is Battle Cat. And I am He-Man.
The character names in the cartoon remained pretty much the same. There was some little variation from season 1 to season 2 because they changed the company that was dubbing the cartoon. So, for example, Sorceress was called La Maga in the second season, and people like Spiker was Testa di Chiodo, or Too Bad was Due Cattivi, and stuff like that. But the main character had their proper name all the time. I have the power in Italian is actually Io ho il potere. I got very interested in the story reading the first mini-comics that were included with the action figure. The first 4 weren't actually mini-comics, they were mini-books with illustration and text. And they were very magical and mysterious, and they didn't give you a lot of clues about the story, so they got me very interested in knowing much more about the characters. and the story. And for about a year and a half, the mini-comics were all we know about Masters of the Universe. Then the series came in, the Filmation series, and I was a bit disappointed at first because it was so different from the story first introduced by Mattel in the mini-comics. But with time, I got involved a lot in the cartoon too. I loved the cartoon too. So everything started to merge in my mind. I loved both of the series, both of the idea of the story, and it kept growing on me. I know, right from '82, I know I was going to be attached to Masters of the Universe all my life. It was the merge of science fiction and fantasy, and probably that these characters were archetypes. I found out later, studying mythology, what was so iconic in this character and these stories. And that grows my passion for these characters and for the story itself. I can say that He-Man is what led me to pursue a career in comic books. I wasn't a big comic book fan back when I was collecting Masters of the Universe, but eventually I became a comic book fan. And I started thinking I wanted to become an artist or a writer for comics. But unconsciously, I knew that I wanted to do that because I wanted to do a He-Man comic book. So it's strange because my first professional job was actually He-Man and the Masters of the Universe comic book. I got involved in the comic book because of my website, where I put a brief story I did at school, comic book in black and white, and this comic caught the attention of Val Staples, the owner of He-Man.org. We started to work together, pitching the license to Mattel, and he chose me as the lead penciler for the series. So eventually, when we got the license, I became the penciler, and I got more and more involved both with He-Man.org and the comic book, and at the end we were also writing together the stories for the comic book.
What we found out very quickly is that when you work as a licensee, you have to keep your fandom in check. There's a lot of things that you want to do when you do a Master Universe comic, or any comic book for that matter, for something that you love, that it's just not going to happen. There's a lot of legalities that you encounter as a fan that you had no idea existed. You find out that there's character issue rights that you didn't know that you would encounter, that there are story guidelines that they anticipate that they didn't want you to follow, that you have to steer with. And on top of that, there's a group of people within the company in different divisions that want to work to have input on this comic book. There was numerous things that we wanted to do in the comic that we simply couldn't do. There was numerous storylines, numerous plot developments, numerous ways to tie everything all together that we really wanted to do, and we hope someday to be able to present that to fans online. What we wanted to do is continue the classic canon and complete the story that was left hanging in a lurch when the line ended. So many fans have wanted to see that canon come to a close, or at least have some sort of closure to it, that we really wanted to do it before we went into a new canon, a new reboot. What we had to try to do was find a way to fit in elements from the classic story and backlog, sort of back issue, flashback sort of scenes that sort of nodded to where that canon may go or may have ended up at.
When we get to the point when we started to develop our stories and deviating a bit from the cartoon, we could start to introduce some of mine and Val's ideas about the series in general, not just about the classic line or about the new line, but what about Masters of the Universe we would love to be. We started introducing a lot of ideas that they really were already in the original series, but never got developed a lot. So we kept introducing these, but we get to the point that we had to stop, so we couldn't get too far with them.
I'm astounded by the legacy that He-Man Masters of the Universe has had over the years. How many people were affected by this when these shows and these toys that they watched and that they owned respectively from when they were children. The impact of this is amazing to me, because at the time we were just making little comic books that packed out with toys. But I do remember when Ron Cook, the art director on it, told me I believe this was on the second or third round of comic books we were producing, that we were producing more comic books than any comic books that were published in this country at that time. We were producing something in the millions, and that number astounded me. In some ways, we saw the impact. I just had no idea how lasting the impact would be.
I think the reason for He-Man's longevity was the fact that it was a fun show made for young kids. It didn't take itself overly seriously. It had a lot of humor, a lot of comedy, and it had the adventure part of it, but it was entertaining and fun, and I think that's a lot of what sometimes is missing from some of the most current cartoons, is that they forget what it's like to have a show that you could just watch and enjoy and have fun with. You don't have to have blood and guts and everything. It's like, no, that's not necessary. It's entertainment, and I think He-Man was like one of those shows that hit it, 100%, hit it on the nail on the head. They did an excellent job of that.
When we produced the new Master Universe comic, we were able to do about 2.5 years worth of comics. Primarily, we wanted to stick with one issue a month. We didn't want to deviate into having too many series, because in today's comic book market, too much of a good thing is saturation, and eventually leads to depletion of sales. We were able to put out approximately 26 issues worth of things, including in various volumes and miniseries and one-shots. And we felt that in that time frame, we were still able to get out a decent amount of material that fans could appreciate and enjoy.
I've been dreaming of being part of Masters of the Universe in some way all my life, and now that in some way I am part of the Masters of the Universe, both of the new line and the classic line thanks to the DVD, it feels very strange, but I'm completely amused about that. It's great. It's great to see my cover in the shops, to see my artwork behind the creators of the cartoons when they get interviewed. It's just great. I really don't have a word to describe the feeling, but it's great. It's awesome. I've been at conventions now for 4 years, meeting fans, and that has always been the best part of the job, because I've met a lot of friends, I got new friends, and we share all the same passion for Masters of the Universe. That's one of the greatest parts of this job. At the San Diego Comic Convention, I'm going to meet people that I wanted to meet for a long time, like Lou Shamer and other creators from the series. So this is taking the convention experience to another level. He-Man has been a big part of my life, and I know that it's going to keep being part of my life forever. And there won't be a point where I get detached from He-Man. Lot of important moments in my life came from He-Man. So it's like I'll keep thinking this is part of me, whatever I'll do. Even if I want to be able to work again on Masters of the Universe, that will be always what started my passion for everything I do.
I'm so cognizant of being in the children's industry and doing children's television and shows. I've done the X-Men, I've done all these kind of shows, and when Lee told me I had a cover that was too violent, I went, okay. What was so violent about it? I had no idea. I know there was one show that I did, one book that I did, that I had He-Man. Usually He-Man in the comic books, they would draw him and one punch and the villain would be out. Well, I did this old style Steve Ditko type page where I had He-Man and this villain, they bopped each other for like a full page. It was like 8 panels, and it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And one panel at the bottom is like the characters watching this fight, and then you cut to the next page, and then He-Man finally takes him out. I thought it was exciting myself. It was like going back to those Steve Ditko days, but I guess parents saw it differently. I don't know. I would never do anything offensive. I just did it exciting, like a regular comic book. That's all.
I actually ran into this young cartoonist who was Southern California based, who was very upset because he had a iconographic or cartoony style, and a friend introduced us, and he had just shown his work as portfolio in a portfolio review to some Marvel editors who looked at his work and they said, no, too cartoony, it's not what we do. And so he was bummed, and a friend introduced us, and I looked at his work, And I said, oh, this is really nice. You know, I think maybe there shouldn't be as much cross-hatching because you've got this great contrast between black and white. You've got a great, terrific line. I'd love to have you do some books for us. And that was Bruce Timm, who went on to do co-create the Batman show for Warner Brothers, and has built quite a nice career for himself. So Bruce actually did his first professional comic book work for me.